Welcome to the Business Clicks podcast, the podcast that interviews business owners to discuss their struggles, strategies, and successes with using the power of the internet to grow their business. We discuss the transition from brick and mortar growth strategies to digital alternatives. We provide new and exciting tactics each business can use to be successful in this new digital world. I'm your host, Adam Barbro, and let's get stuck in. Welcome to episode 3 of the Business Clicks podcast. Joining us today is Peter Lucas from Kestrel Solutions over the phone. Before we get started, Peter, I wanted to ask you, what is one thing you believe that will make a successful business in the years to come?
I think it's about being adaptable to the changing circumstances of business, because I think nothing else COVID has proven that things can change very rapidly. And it's a matter of being able to adapt. There are some fundamental in businesses that have never changed and won't change. But I think the one thing that people need to be able to is to be able to adapt to changing circumstances.
Definitely agree with you on that. I'm very interested to talk to you today because I think given your wealth of knowledge and background with business, as you just sort of touched on, I think these fundamentals that you talk about, particularly as we go into this more digital era of getting ourselves in front of people for our businesses and lead generation and marketing, I think those fundamentals of business are still there and don't go away. So I think that's something that I'm very keen to talk to you about. Would you just like to talk to the people about, I guess, a bit about your background and where did you start and, what do you do now?
Right, yeah. Thanks, Adam, for that. I'm a chartered accountant, have been for 37 years. So I came through the chartered ranks at a small firm in Sydney. But the firm specialised largely in insolvency. So my career background has been in insolvency. I've been here in Brisbane now for 32 years. And I still have an insolvency practice. I'm still a registered liquidator. But over the time, I've done a lot of turnarounds, and both through formal processes and informally, that have helped businesses survive and prosper in the future. So a lot of our focus now is on that sort of work and in helping people get better at business. Because the two main reasons business fail is through being financially undercapitalised, and most small business start off undercapitalised, not having sufficient capital, and borrowing money against your house is not really capital because you're paying interest and you're paying loans back. The other thing is what I call is management capital. Experience tells me that over my career of nearly 40 years in insolvency is that very few businesses that have failed have the owners been weak at their chosen professional trade. Very few electrical businesses have failed has the guy been a bad electrician or a bad builder or a bad dentist or whatever. It's more about their management skills. And most trades and professions don't spend much time when you do go to university or TAFE on that management side of business. And so they don't have a lot of skills. And they learn them on the run, maybe doing some books, etc. And that's often why business fails, because they make bad choices. And business, by the very definition of business owners, they are generally optimists. So they look at the positive. They're half glass full, and they're looking at the positive sides of things, which is great. And you need to be that way if you're going to be successful. But sometimes you've got to be glass half empty, in that you've got to look at what the risks are in a decision you're going to make. And how do you balance that risk against the upside potential reward? And is it worth doing? And that's where we're using my skills in helping business owners make good decisions going forward and transferring my knowledge and skills in a whole different way, a lot of ways, to make them better business people and make good decisions, have good processes in making decisions so that they minimise the risk of failure and maximise the chance of success. And in fact, I got an email only yesterday, Adam, from a client I'm coaching who's just picked up a big new client, and he said, we're going to have to discuss how I'm going to service it. And this is guys, the client is the second largest in Australia or something in that particular industry. And this is just a small business that I'm coaching the owner in. So, but we've talked about how to win referrals. and he's getting those referrals now, which is growing his business. So it's where we're really helping is helping people get over being undercapitalised, how to manage their cash flow, and increasing their business skills.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that sums up a lot. It made me actually think of, when you're talking about that, it made me think about, I don't know if you've read the book, very popular, is the EMyth Revisited by Michael Gerber, and him talking about too many entrepreneurs and business owners being operationalists rather than looking at the bigger picture, and either bringing someone on to teach them those skills or using those other people to do those other parts of the business and not being stuck in the business. And I think from experience, like what you just said, there's too many people that don't have those management skills or don't have certain skill sets, and they're not reaching out when they probably should. And I think a great example of that is, marketing and business coaching and lead generation, to get those skills or to have someone help them along those way.
Now, I've read the EMyth Revisited, and I've actually been and seen Gerber speak, and fantastic and smart guy. And 2 points. One is, as a business owner, particularly when you're starting up, the skill sets you need to be the entrepreneur, the visionary that can set the scene. You need to be a marketer. You need to be a salesperson. You need to be an administrator and an accountant to do the books. If you've got staff, you've got to be a HR and a recruiter expert. Then if it's some sort of production process, a production expert or a purchasing officer. So you've got a workplace health and safety is a very relevant thing there. So you've got all these skill sets. Well, there's very few people that are going to be very good at all of them. So it's a matter of how do you surround yourself with the right people. And one of the ways that we help is that because of my insolvency experience, and I've run over 130 businesses in my career, including being the management teams and receiverships of national companies turning over $100 million, to being the administrator of, micro businesses, etc. So I've been there making these decisions. So I've learned a lot of skills around marketing and sales, but I'm not an expert. I don't know enough to identify things to then know when we need to bring an expert into play. And I recently helped a client who's got a HR issue. I told him when he rang me a couple of weekends ago and told me about the problem, I said, don't let the guy to come to work tomorrow on the Monday. But I'd introduced him to a HR consultant previously, get onto that person, get them back in, and now they're working through a process. If he'd come back to work, 4 staff would have resigned on the spot. So the owners are very grateful for that phone call we had on that Sunday morning to keep them out of track. And I think going back to the Gerber's point about entrepreneurs being too much operationally, I think there's each business owner has 3 areas he's got to work on. A small business, yes, you're going to have to spend some time operationally. You can't afford to bring managers in to run the day-to-day operations. But you've got to have time to work on the business, which is what Gerber really focuses on, at working on the business. You've got to spend time working in the business. The third area is working on yourself, developing your own skill base. Whether it's in some things people will be doing because they've got to do things within their own profession to develop, but it's about also your management and entrepreneurial skills, which is a lot of what the work I'm doing with clients.
Yeah, definitely. I'm keen to get into the part of the conversation where we talk a bit about, because you've obviously had a lot of experience in dealing with a lot of clients. I'm interested from your point of view, what have you seen that maybe have businesses implemented well or failed to implement in terms of marketing strategies? Are there certain strategies that really stick out to you, or is there certain personalities that people are just good at executing marketing strategies? When I talk marketing strategies and you talk about all the businesses that you've worked with, do you see any trends that pop up consistently?
What I see in the marketing sense is quite often people have a set mindset, a fixed mindset about what's the right sort of marketing. And I'll often go into business, and I do a lot in the hospitality, particularly licensed clubs, and I'll walk into one and they'll say, I suppose you're going to cut out all our advertising. And I'll say, no, let's do an audit of where you spend your money and what's the outcomes. And then we'll work out a marketing strategy. Say, look, at the end of the day, the best businesses in the world, the Coca-Colas, etc., the Fords, General Motors, they've had their duds. And they've got millions of dollars to spend into market research. And if they can get it wrong, we can get it wrong. So sometimes it's experimental, but you try to do it quickly. Fail quickly is the notion, and learn and adapt. And I think it's about, the biggest thing is about implementation. And get started. Don't look for perfection, but get in and do things. But have a way of measuring their success.
Definitely.
Now,
I think. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think if you don't have a goal, I think if these businesses don't have a goal with their marketing, that's always the first step, because they've got no way to measure what they're doing. And touch on the fact with the experiment, I heard a great quote the other day, and as a very successful business owner, and he said, life is an experiment. And I think that's the way he's viewed his businesses, and that's part of what makes him so successful. He's happy to start small, test, adapt, and then scale, where I think too many businesses, as you just said, are looking for perfection rather than just to execute and test and see what the results are, and then being able to adapt based off actual information rather than just being stuck in your head.
And they're not necessarily looking at the right sort of growth.
Yeah,
so I think it's about implementation, just doing things, but figuring out the right medium for their type of business.
Definitely. I think
who is their really understanding who is their customer and who is their target customer. How do they get to know it? And give you a good example. A colleague of mine who's a sales guru has a thing called what is zebra sales. What it comes about was he's saying the lion. They pack, they're the lion pride. They hunt together. They said, what's their ideal food? Their ideal animal is the zebra. Because the zebra's fat. It's got a lot of meat on it. It's not that fast, and it doesn't have horns. So he says, and they've worked out where's the zebra most likely to be. It'll be around the water holes. So they know to go looking for them there. Then they have their secondary, what's if there's no zebras, what else? And he uses that model to look at who's your customer, who's your ideal customer, where do you find them, how do you get to know them, how do you get to communicate with them, and is that digital? There's still, appropriate for newspaper advertising and traditional, radio and TV for the right sort of market. But they'll also then often do, digital marketing as well. So I think it's one of the things I could sometimes get disappointed with marketing consultants is they don't always think from the client's point of view. I'll give you a whole list of, and I've had this for my own business, a whole list of possible mediums, but don't tell you, hey, your business is going to be best targeting this area. And that, I think, can differentiate the consultant who can actually think through and be willing to turn around and sometimes say, what I might have to offer, or one of my offerings might not be worth going for you because it's not going to work as well. But it's getting out and just having a crack and implementing.
Yeah, definitely. I think I know when I'm doing strategy with people, particularly marketing strategy, the first thing that we always talk about, to touch on what you just talked about, was really nailing down who your customer is and then where your customer is. If you don't know really well who they are and where they are, and a lot more detail than people usually talk about. Oh, my customer is someone who wants to go to the gym. That's not a who. That's just a airy-fairy person out there. If you can really nail down who your customer is and where your customer is, you then know how to create the messaging to grab the attention on the correct platform. And you create that, and I think people aren't customer focused and specific enough with really looking at everything from the customer's point of view on where they are and what their current habits are on whatever medium you're doing, as you're talking about, whether it's going to be digital, whether you're still going to be able to use some sort of print in your local area or whatever it is to be able to get out there and get in front of your ideal customers. If you know who they are and you know where their attention is, that gives you then the whole foundation to be able to go through and start creating correct messaging that's really going to hit them in an emotional state where you're actually going to actually be able to create change more effectively.
Oh, very much so, very, very much so, that you understand and creating that change and what's going to prompt someone and seeing whether someone's in a state of ready for change or dissatisfied with their current state is a critical factor in getting people to buy. And if you can get to them before and raise their readiness to change, their level of dissatisfaction with their current state, you can actually capture that person where before they even go out looking in the marketplace, which makes it a lot easier sale than suddenly, they're out there doing the research and do they come across you? And you're one of a dozen or so other providers, be it a gym or whatever market it might be, which you're then competing against. So that really targeted approach is really, really important.
Definitely. And if you don't have that targeted approach with the messaging, you're really not going to go anywhere. I heard a great story the other day with talking about two stores that opened up next to each other and were selling the same thing. One went straight into the sales tactical style model where they just wanted to get people in the door and make the sales. The store next door went into the model where they thought more strategically and just wanted to provide value and create this brand loyalty. So they weren't necessarily making as many sales in, year one, but that brand loyalty just, is a compounding effect where over the years, that store then went on to open 6 other stores compared to store number 1, which still grew by 10% a year, but it was very much single focused customers coming in to buy something and then move on. And there is no brand loyalty there. And I think that's one of the biggest troubles is not having that strategic thinking around how you're actually going to get out of the market and not necessarily look to make a sale, but just provide value. I know one of the biggest things I try and push people to do is when we're talking about particularly content online is not just to go out there and try and make a sale. I think if you hop on LinkedIn right now, you'll see 95% of businesses are out there saying, need help from this? We can help you. And I'm like, that doesn't provide any value. Why are they just going to come and do that? People miss the point that if you're able to think strategically, think long-term, create some loyalty and really get out there and improve who you are and where you're positioned, that then gives you the ability to, arouse a want in someone and solve their problem without actually making a sale to them, which will then create real customer loyalty in the future.
I totally agree. The other thing I think about the marketing implementation is understanding your strengths and weaknesses as far as even around content, etc. And give you a good example, going back in my career when I worked in the insolvency division as senior manager in one of the big 4 accounting firms. We decided we were going to do newsletters. And we had a bit of a plan of what we were going to do. Well, we never got one newsletter out. One, we all got a bit too busy to write the content to it. And we'd recognised that we probably need to have 3 or 4 done before we start sending them out, but we never got round to it because we were just too busy doing day-to-day stuff and probably being accountants, not necessarily gifted writers, that's going to capture the attention. And so we would have been better off outsourcing the writing and the content preparation to someone else, even if it was just sort of doing an interview and then someone giving some ideas and someone putting it all together. And at that stage, we didn't really have a marketing department per se to be able to do that for us. So it's understanding that if you don't have time, whatever, spend the money. Because if it's going to work and your strategy's right, you'll get the return on the investment. It's like people in my line as a business coach, people sometimes reluctant because they see things as a cost as opposed to being an investment to drive improvement in your business, whether it's improving by becoming more efficient and effective and lowering costs, or driving more sales and profitable sales to drive the business.
Definitely.
And you need to invest.
I 100% agree. I think the investment terminology there is the big difference. Some people just look at it, I spent this much on ads. Okay, and I think the other thing which you mentioned there, which was longevity and doing something which fits in with your natural style of wanting to do and have an interest in doing, so you can remain consistent. I think one of the biggest issues with businesses is being able to produce, whether it's content, whether it's video, audio, written word, or photo, being able to produce something consistently is a key that people don't do regularly. I know the exact reason I started this podcast was because I wanted to do something more consistently. And this gives me the ability to not only chat with people that I'm interested in learning from and having good discussion with and put out content that will actually provide value to my audience, but more so, it's something that I know that I would be happy to do consistently over a long period of time, which I think is a big difference between those that have these ideas of, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, or I want to do video. I think I should do video, but I don't feel comfortable in video. And my message to them is, well, then don't do video, because you'll do it for 2 weeks and then stop doing it. And you've sort of just spent 2 weeks doing something which hasn't provided you any value or any return of investment.
Totally correct. And there's different ways, of doing videos, as you all know, Adam, too. So you can look and say, well, how do we get something that is comfortable? It is about consistency, of getting that message out, and it is a long-term game. In a lot of cases, people won't need you, but I can't remember how many times I've had phone calls from someone saying, Peter, I met you somewhere now, or you did a presentation here, you might not remember me, but then they'll have a referral for me. Because, you've left an impression with them, be it by video or a LinkedIn article or doing a presentation somewhere, that they then suddenly had a need for the services. So you've also got to think that, the marketing is, it's great to have short-term success, but it's also, a long-term game being in business.
Definitely. And I think those who have the long-term thinking and want to think, what's going to happen 10 years ahead, which are the ones that are going to be on top. And that's sort of brought me around to why doing this podcast. I wanted to talk to you about, just to finish off, what do you think marketing for businesses, and maybe particularly in your industry or industries that you work with a lot, how do you think that's going to change in the next 10 years with this digital world just continuing to evolve and become more part of our regular day-to-day lives? How do you think that's going to change the way marketing?
People will need to adapt to that. People will need to be using social media. People will need to think about video content. Now, the question is, what's going to be the next step beyond video content? Who knows where technology is going to take us? But you've got to keep evolving. If you can just keep doing the same thing that was being done 20 years ago, it's not going to work. I do a lot with the licensed clubs, and they're all having to, they're all now having Facebook pages, and, I've got a client I've worked with for 10 years. Start off website, he's gone to Facebook, he's gone to Instagram. As he's progressed in their marketing, all with great success. So I think it's a matter of just evolving, but not just doing a medium for the sake of that being the medium that's the current fact, but knowing, is that going to get to your target customers and prospective customers? So I think it's going to be a move, continual move to digital. Where we go next, you've got Facebook, and of course Donald Trump's going to start his own social media platform. So is that going to be the next place you go? And marketing, I say that tongue in cheek, but it is what's going to be the next evolution of the digital world.
Yeah, I think I think you have to sort of look at technology and how that sort of created Facebook, right? The 4G network was released and faster internets were released, which allowed for Facebook and Instagram, this visual content to actually be possible via mobile phones and online. And I think with the release slowly of 5G, which is going to take it to that next level, you're going to see a whole new wave of new platforms doing new things that we can't even necessarily think that we're going to use in day-to-day life right now. If 4G has had that much of an impact with how marketing affect, how Facebook and Instagram and everything has been involved in our lives, 5G is going to do exactly the same. And all 5G does is give us more data and more consistency in the network, which means things like, I think, AR and VR are going to be big players in the next 10 years to come. I think we haven't seen any platforms that do that now because we haven't got the technology to be able to keep up to date, but that's going to accelerate really fast as soon as those fast networks come out. And I think...
And we're going to see the traditional media companies having to adapt. It doesn't mean there's not a place for radio or a place for, free-to-air TV or for newspapers and magazines, but they're all moving to online. Channel 9 owns Stan.
Yeah, definitely.
Their streaming service. So we're going to see, they know that they've got to adapt and keep up.
Definitely. There's no right or wrong platform. There's just where is the attention of your customers? Who is your customer and where are they? That's where you need to be hitting, and that's where you need to focus your messaging to suit whatever platform that is, that's going to create some value, and then you're going to be able to provide enough value to get to the stage where you can, generate an offer and then you're going to have a certain percentage buy. I always use the 80-20 rule and say 80% value, 20% offers. If you're able to do that, it means you're providing enough value to people they don't just feel like you're there to make a sale to them. I wanted to thank you for joining me today, Peter, and I just wanted to...
Oh, that's right.
I think what you basically, what you talked about was excellent. I think it was great to get your point of view from all these different industries and creating from more of a business perspective around your marketing in terms of getting in front of the customers where they are, keeping consistent, creating content that's good for you and your business and which you can remain consistent on, I think is really what separates people majority of the time with how well they're going to do with their marketing. So I want to thank you very much for joining me today, Peter. If people are interested in getting in touch with you or working with you, where could they find you?
My phone number is 07 3232 5250, or they can contact me by email on plucas, all lowercase, it's LUCAS, at Kestrel Solutions, KESTREL, solutions.com.au.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Business Clicks. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Adam.
I'm your host, Adam Barbro. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Business Clicks podcast.